Deep in the Himalayas, on the western edge of the Tibetan plateau, lies Ladak, one of the highest and driest inhabited regions on Earth. Scorched by the sun in summer, frozen solid for 8 months of winter, this is a place that might seem incapable of sustaining human life. Yet over the centuries, fields have been carved out of the rocks and sand of the desert, enabling the people not only to survive, but to prosper. But the face of Ladak is changing.
Agriculture is dying. Most people are coming out of agriculture.
The modernization of Ladak calls into question a number of widely held assumptions about industrial society. In fact, it challenges us to reassess the whole notion of progress.
Back and forth and
Helena Nordberg-Hodge has spent much of the last 18 years in Ladak.
I know it might sound far-fetched, but I'm convinced that looking at Ladak can actually help us to better understand what's going on in the West. When I first went to Ladak, there was no pollution, no crime, and people had lived peacefully side by side for centuries. And there was an incredible joy to life. But now, in recent years, I've seen the impact of the modern Western world on the traditional culture. And this ability to contrast the old with the new clarifies a lot of things. It helps to explain the reasons behind many of the problems that we face in the West, the reasons behind environmental breakdown and the breakdown of communities, and more importantly, it helps to show how we might get out of this mess that we've created.
An independent kingdom until the mid-1800s, Ladak is today part of the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir. Its cultural heritage is Tibetan, so much so, in fact, that it is still widely known as Little Tibet. While parts of Ladak are largely Muslim, the predominant religion of Central or Old Ladak is Tibetan Buddhism. In area, Ladak is almost the same size as England, but supports a population of only 130,000, the vast majority of whom live as farmers in small villages. Since there are less than 4 inches of rainfall a year, the Ladakis have to rely instead on glacial meltwater, which is brought to the fields through an elaborate system of channels, often many miles long. Cultural traditions have limited population growth and help to ensure that the natural carrying capacity of the land is not exceeded. More than 90% of Ladakhi families own their own land, an average of 3 or 4 acres, and a number of animals. Land holdings are neither sold nor divided, but passed on intact from one generation to the next.
나타스간지 뒤에 작봐 그 둘러 주고 나 뒤에 나
아피 매매 차오 차모 창망년보 득성랑 되지 디제노 차오 차마 디제노 디제 나마 부사사 라스 정에 빈칸벨라
장문도 마시게 되는 죽시 정주치나 젠테 라 정말 지지스코스 감도 장문 마시게 괜 두칸인 줄이야 뭐나
Villages lie between 10 and 14,000 feet. At this altitude, the growing season is extremely short. Nonetheless, local varieties of wheat and barley produce plentiful yields year after year. Each family also keeps a small vegetable garden, and at lower elevations there are orchards of apple and apricot trees. With few exceptions, basic needs are met within the community. Houses are made from the resources of the immediate environment: stone for the foundations and ground floor, and sun-dried bricks made of mud and straw. Dwellings are large and graceful, yet there's no need for architects. Everyone in Ladak knows how to build a house. Self-reliance is based on skills which are finely tuned to the local environment. During the summer, villagers spend time at the high pastures watching over their animals. At 16,000 feet, conditions are harsh, but these local breeds of sheep and goats are well adapted to the environment. Vegetation here is scarce, so the herds are moved each day to prevent overgrazing. This is an almost timeless life. Work and leisure are one. Over the generations, the Ladakis have learned to make the most of the resources around them. Almost everything that grows wild is gathered and put to use for fodder, food or medicine, fence making or basket weaving.
People, they don't waste anything in Ladak. Whatever it may be wood, it may be even stones, it may be grass, it may be water, it may be anything. You see, they don't waste it. They take care of it. You see, in that way, we could really see that Ladakh are actually very economist. They're the real economists, see. not the modern economics as you see, increasing as in production, go on producing things, destroying all the natural resources. Not like that. So taking care of the natural resources and how to develop it.
Everyday life in the village is based on a close relationship between people and the earth. This living experience of interconnectedness
in that way, the farming is done. And it is done in a very cooperative basis, you see. They will go to the neighboring families to say that some people should come to help us. So they will come to see. And in return, you see, this family who does the job has also, so some of the members of that family have to take part in, see, in the case of another family. Say no money is paid, say no cash or nothing. Only now say food is served.
The small scale of the economy helps to strengthen community ties. People have the security of knowing that they can depend on one another. While most work within the village is undertaken at family level, some larger projects, like the rebuilding of irrigation canals or major pathways, involve the community as a whole. In communities of this scale, people know that helping others is in their own interest. Village-level decisions are taken by a council made up of representatives of chutso, or groupings of 10 or so households. Although most of the formal decisions are taken by men, women in Ladak enjoy a remarkably high position. Almost all the important decisions affecting people's lives are taken at the household level, where women are at the center. Harvesting involves the whole family. Neighbors and friends also join in as part of a time-tested system of reciprocity. In fact, harvests are often staggered so that several families, even from different villages, can work together.
Even the small children, they also go to the field, and old people, say. Now old people, they will give good advice, say. They will supervise how it is going on, and like that. Say.
This is the most critical time of the year, since the crops have to be gathered in quickly before the first snows. Even so, the work goes on at a relaxed pace. Agriculture in Ladak is based on human and animal power and handmade tools. The most advanced technology is the rantak, a simple water-powered mill for grinding grain. Yet in the 4 months between the spring and autumn frosts, the Ladakis managed to produce more than enough food for the entire year. In most years, there's even a sizable surplus of grain that can be traded for salt or tea or even jewelry. And there's enough barley to make into gallons of chang, the local beer. Long breaks are part of a typical day in the summer working season. With the harvest over, hardly a week goes by without a party. Singing, dancing and music that involve the whole community. Weddings last many days, even weeks. Even religious events take on a festive air, particularly the annual cham dances, which are held at the bigger monasteries. The dancers are all monks. The dances they perform are dramatic enactments of Buddhist philosophy. Life in Ladak is clearly more than mere subsistence. This is in fact a rich culture, one in which people are able to meet not only their material needs, but more importantly, their need to belong, both to their place on the earth and to the community of which they are a part.
It's important not to idealize traditional cultures. In Ladak, for instance, there was high infant mortality and it was very cold in the winter, and people certainly weren't as comfortable as we are in the West today. But if you look at what's important, then the traditional culture really worked. It was sustainable. People had managed to live in this difficult environment for centuries, and people were really happy.
For the last 2 decades, Ladak has been increasingly exposed to modern influences. Roads now link the region to the Indian plains, bringing the Ladakis not only material goods, but Western notions of progress. In the capital, Leh, a range of consumer goods is now available. And for many Ladakis, life is becoming less physically demanding. However, modernization is undermining the very foundations of the traditional culture, and giving rise to an all too familiar pattern of potentially devastating environmental and social problems.
With this phenomena, the whole value system is crumbling. All the values are dwindling, and it has become very difficult for the people to keep to the ancient values.
Leh is now growing exponentially as the new economy encourages people to leave the land in pursuit of paid employment. Housing colonies sprawl into the desert, unconnected to the resources around them. In the past, Leh was at the hub of a self-reliant economy. Its essential needs were met from relatively nearby. Today, the people of Leh are becoming dependent on outside sources, not just for luxuries and consumer goods, but for basic necessities like food, clothing, and energy.
Development in Ladak, and it's the same everywhere in the world, is a process of planned change. And what it's done is to systematically dismantle the local economy, local self-reliance, and the first victim is the small farmer, whose entire livelihood is completely undermined.
As a result of heavy subsidies, wheat trucked in from the other side of the Himalayas sells in Ladak for considerably less than wheat grown 5 minutes walk away. Local agriculture is made to seem uneconomic. There's little incentive to continue farming.
In
the short term, cheap imported food might appear to be a real benefit, but the result is that the Ladakis are being increasingly tied to a global economy, putting them at the mercy of market forces far beyond their control. In the traditional economy, a kilo of barley is a kilo of barley. Yields are quite consistent from year to year, so the family's livelihood is secure. People know that they will always be able to provide for themselves. The situation in the money economy of Leh is very different. A kilo of barley might cost 3 rupees one year and 6 rupees the next. Moreover, supplies of imported goods are far from reliable. For 2/3 of the year, the passes linking Ladak with the rest of India are closed by heavy snows. Stockpiles built up over the summer are often depleted before the end of winter. Staple foods and kerosene, which is now widely used for cooking, are both rationed. Competing for scarce resources inevitably leads to friction. What's more, the very bureaucratic distribution system contributes to a new sense of inferiority and inadequacy. In the traditional society, people were largely in charge of their own lives. Nowadays, more and more decisions, even decisions affecting everyday life in the village, are made in distant government offices. As the focus of the economy shifts to Leh, families are splitting into ever smaller nuclear units. There's no room for grandparents in houses like these, either physically or emotionally. In the new money economy, traditions of cooperation have lost their meaning and are fast disappearing.
In the past, we were very much dependent on each other. We really used to have some feeling for each other because we were dependent. I was worried that when I have some problem, my brother would help. And now when the people have money, even for among ourselves, we don't depend on it, you know. If we need something, we say go and get from the market.
The whole relationship has become very superficial. If there is some strain, some strain and stress, then this relationship doesn't hold.
Even in the villages, the old system of shared work is breaking down. Mutual support is giving way to more individualized concerns, based largely on money. The health.
What I've seen now is that development is actually speeding life up. Suddenly people have to work at the speed of the available technologies. A friend of mine from a remote village pointed this out very vividly. She said, I just can't understand what's happening. My sister who lives in the capital, she's got all these things that save time. She's got a kerosene stove, she's got a telephone, they have a jeep, and yet when I go to visit them, they barely have time to talk to me.
As traditional patterns of community are eroded, a new sense of divisiveness comes into being. Crime and violence are increasing year by year. So too is ethnic friction.
The relation between Buddhist and...
Why is it that the Ladakis allow their way of life to be so degraded? Helena Nורברg-Hodge believes that it has to do with the psychological pressure to modernize.
In one of my first years in Ladak, I was in this incredibly beautiful village. All the houses were 3 stories high and painted white, and I was just amazed. So out of curiosity, I asked a young man from that village to show me the poorest house. And he thought for a bit, and then he said, we don't have any poor houses. The same person I heard 8 years later saying to a tourist, oh, if you could only help us Ladakis, we're so poor. And what had happened was that in the intervening 8 years, he'd been bombarded with all these one-dimensional images of life in the West. He'd seen people with fast cars, looking as though they never worked, and with lots of money. And suddenly, by comparison, his culture seemed backward and primitive and poor.
The Ladakis are losing their old sense of self-confidence, of self-worth. In an attempt to live up to the modern Western image, they are alienating themselves from family and community and becoming increasingly insecure. In the long term, one of the most serious threats to the culture and local economy comes from education. Generally, schools are considered to be among the unqualified benefits of development. But what's happening in Ladak calls into question what we really mean by education. In the traditional culture, children learn from experience. They learn how to grow food, how to build houses, how to make clothes. And they learn about the values which have supported the Ladakhi way of life over the centuries. By contrast, modern education trains children at best for specialized jobs in urban centers. But these jobs are scarce. Increasingly, education is training people to be unemployed. In Ladakhi schools today, children learn nothing about their own culture or about local resources. Instead, they follow a curriculum based on the Western industrial model. Even the language is foreign.
I appreciate the poetry of Wordsworth.
If a child here is taught, he or she is taught in Urdu, a language totally alien to Ladakhis. Their parents wouldn't speak a word of in the villages. More unbelievable is that after these 8 years, you have to go to English abruptly, as a medium of instruction, you know.
Zenat, what do you say? When wealth is lost, nothing is lost. But when health is lost, nothing is lost. But character is lost, everything is lost. Yes, when health is lost, something is lost.
When viewed from a broad perspective, the impact of development has been profoundly disturbing. Modernization is no doubt bringing some short-term material benefits. But in so doing, it is unraveling the rich fabric of relationships which held Ladak together over the centuries. It is polluting the environment, breaking down community, and eroding personal identity.
In one way, in spite of all the material progress, all the inventions, and all the knowledges, if we really look to the human situation, and I think they are more miserable now.
If Ladak teaches us anything, the lesson is that we need to move towards a more ecological, community-based way of life. We can't go back to living like the Ladakis, but we can strive to re-establish our connection with each other and with the earth.
Yardım verme gaza